Hello, welcome back to Oliver's Greenhouse. Now in this video we're going to be having a look at, well, primarily at my carnivorous plant. This is Drosera regia, otherwise known as the King Sundew. Now this thing turns into an absolute monster. It has got the potential to be huge. Some of the leaves are already approaching, if not in excess of 30 centimetres long. Now it's quite rare. It was only found in one of two places in South Africa, one being the Kloof mountain range. Well, I'm not sure whether it's still growing there in the wild. Where it grows around seeps and springs in quite long grass, so it sort of remains sort of semi-buried amongst other foliage. Now they can be quite fussy, and some people really struggle with them. I don't. I think I find them certainly from my one, relatively easy to grow. I use a very free draining media to grow the plant in, and I use quite a tall pot. So what I thought today is, because I really want to get this as big as possible, I'm going to repot it into a slightly taller pot to give some more depth for the roots to explore and extend into. I also noticed during having a quick inspection, I've got a large root poking out the bottom of it here. So I'm going to cut that off. I'm actually going to take some root cuttings of it and try and propagate it and get another couple of plants out of this. If I bring it forward to the camera, I'll show you what I mean. We'll be able to have a bit of a closer look. Okay, so here's the plant in question. You can see how big it is next to my hand. Some of these leaves are getting really huge, and one of the really nice things about it is as they emerge, if we zoom in, if I zoom you guys in ever so slightly, they are sort of unfurl, a bit like fern fronds, which is a really interesting feature. They produce a huge amount of mucilage all the way up that tentacle. You can see it. There we go. Focus in a little bit, you'll be able to see a bit better. Unfortunately, the sun's gone in, which is making everything a little bit dark and affecting the camera a little bit, which is a shame. But it's a really fantastic plant. If I touch, you'll be able to see how sticky it is. And they've actually been known to catch like pretty big prey, even some small birds and stuff, apparently, is what I've heard. Whether that's true or not remains to be seen. So, if I zoom out again, during my inspection of it, to sort of preempt repotting it, I was having a look underneath at the bottom of the pot. If I do this without tipping the whole plant out, I'm going to rotate you so there's some light. Can you see this big black root here? There's another root tip here and another root tip here, and this big black root comes out of one of the holes in the pots and goes back into itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to cut it anyway to get the plant out. So I'm going to cut it here and cut it here, and I'm going to divide it into two, and I'm going to put it onto a bed of sphagnum moss and see if we can propagate it. Okay, so one of the first things you're going to need to do, or in preparation for taking some of these root cuttings, is I've got one of these clear takeaway containers. These are quite good because you can just microwave them and sterilise them. If I hold them up to the camera, you should be able to see that. So what I've done is I've got some long fibre sphagnum moss in here, which is really moist. I've just sprayed it with some just normal rainwater to keep it wet, because you're going to want to make sure that the root cuttings have got really good contact with this. They need to be, otherwise they're not going to take, or they're not going to strike. So we need to keep that super moist, and an appropriate lid to cover them up, to keep that humidity as high as possible. Why we use sphagnum mosses as well, because it has antimicrobial and antifungal properties, so that's why we're going to be using that. Okay, so I'm going to try and do this where you can see it. I've got the camera set up really high up, and hopefully I'm going to be able to do this without tipping the whole plant out, making a complete hash out of this. So I'm going to just slowly invert it like this. So hopefully you'll be able to see the roots which are here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut flush. Oh, that's the end of the root there. So I'm just going to cut it flush here. They're quite big, wiry roots. So we've got that one off there. You can see these other roots which are sort of trying to head out this way. So we've got our root. I'll pop the plant back down over there. Wind you guys down. Okay, so what I've done is I've just moved my nepenthes out of the way, so we've got a bit better light. It was a bit dark over the other side. So what we're going to do is literally just cut this into a couple of centimetre pieces. I think we'll get 3 out of this, That's what I'm going to aim for. So I'm going to make one cut just here, And then I'm going to cut this piece in half again without cutting myself. Like that. So we've got 3 little pieces there. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to place them onto the sphagnum moss here. Hopefully you should be able to see this quite easily. So we want to make sure we've got good contact, so I'm going to sort of almost bury them in there a little bit. It's really important they stay nice and moist. Try and put them some sort of equidistance apart. Like that, and just push them down, firm them into the sphagnum moss like that. And then what we're going to do, this shouldn't have any detriment effect on the mother plant, and all we're going to do is just cover that up like that. So it's got a nice seal on it, and then I'm going to put it somewhere, probably on the orchid side of the greenhouse, so it's not going to get any direct sunlight, because if this thing gets super hot, well, it's game over for the plant inside. So I'll probably stick that over the other side. Over this side somewhere, I expect. Just pop it down over the back where it can stay warm. So that's the root cuttings. On to repotting. Okay, so the pot I'm going to be using is this one here. It's a 7 inches across and about 8 inches, 9 inches tall. It's like a perfect cymbidium pot really, but what I want to do is maximise the amount of depth that the roots of the plant can take advantage of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally drop it on. So I'm going to fill it up with media, insert the plant like that, fill in the gaps around it, take it out, tip it out of its pot, and then pop it straight back in again. That way I'm sort of minimising the amount of disturbance that the plant's having. And also this media isn't that old. This media is only a year, well, under a year old, so we don't need to go super crazy with it. It's not like it's going to be sour or anything. So that's the plan basically. And in the meantime, what I might do is put an elastic band around it, just a big one, just to hold everything together, because the trouble is, if you get these tentacles covered in mud, you just can't get rid of it. Also might sort out the top dressing as well. This is all just moss now. So what I might do is, depending on how easily it comes off, I might see if I can top dress it with some aquarium gravel instead, because that will retard the moth's growth, and also it will help to reflect light a little bit as well, which will help to keep the roots cool. Now these plants do not enjoy having their roots hot. If they get warm roots, they will die or dwindle and then die. So that's really important not to allow that to happen. Pick you up. Okay, so the media I'm going to be using is predominantly sphagnum peat moss. I actually need to get some more. It was a good reminder. I've been doing quite a lot of potting up recently and I'm running a bit low. Horticultural sand and a lot of this gravel. And there's already some water in the bottom of this, so I'm just going to go ahead and mix this up, because you want it to be super free draining. Well, it's a bit of a Drosera regia tricky plants, and some people, what suits some growers won't necessarily suit another grower. So, but I'm just using what I've used in the past. I've used this mix to cultivate Drosera really successfully, and I've also, this is what the plant's currently growing in. So if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it, sort of thing. So this is what I'm going to be potting the plant up and into. Now the mix that it was in originally is going to be even more free draining than this. So this is going to help to, because we're extending or increasing the soil volume, I don't want it to have a negative impact on the moisture holding or draining ability of that. So by dropping it on, we're ensuring that, because the core of the pot that it's growing is obviously functioning quite nicely at the moment, we're not really having any issues with the plant. So we don't want to change that, but giving it some new space for the roots to explore and is going to be really beneficial, I think. So that's basically what we're doing. Just give this a good mix up in here. Some people grow these really, really wet with a very high water table around the pot. So say it's like permanently sat in sort of like 4 inches, maybe even as much as 5 inches, depending on the height of the pot, of water, and keep it almost like in almost like muddy conditions to great effect. I've heard that can be problematic, and so I've decided to follow the route of caution, and what I decided to do was to go for a big tall pot and a really free draining media, which is what this is. And it seems to work. What I'm going to go and do is just going to go and grab an elastic band, wash my hands because I've got to touch that other plant, and if I leave brown bits all over it from the peat moss, it's going to look unsightly. So I'll go and do that now. This is all mixed up. I'll be back in a minute. Ta-da! What I've actually decided to do is I've actually just wrapped the whole of the Drosera regia in cling film, because that's going to stop when I'm putting compost in and around it when it's in its new pot. It's going to stop it from getting covered in crud. I suppose you could do this for any carnivorous plant or sundew, because once you get those little bits of peat moss on the tentacles, it's game over basically. It will be on there forever. So what I'm going to do is, hopefully you're zoomed out enough to see this, I'm going to start filling this pot up until it's at the required height, about here. Once we're at a decent height, I'm going to start filling in around it to drop it on basically. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some media in the bottom of it. Now, strange phenomenon about, well, not phenomenon, strange fact about the King Sundew Drosera regia is this guy is actually quite fond of a bit of fertiliser. Now, what I have done with this pot, not this pot that I'm potting up, but the pot that the plant's actually growing in, it's actually got 3 to 4 slow release Osmocote pellets in it, because these plants, unlike, whereas fertiliser would be like almost certain death to most Drosera, the King Sundew is actually quite fond of a bit of fertilisation. So just bear that in mind. That's quite a good idea if in future, if you find your Drosera are waning or not exactly proliferating as you wish, it may be prudent to apply a bit of fertiliser. I've heard of people using Maxi, the seaweed extract fertiliser to actually spray on the leaves. I've never done anything like that. I tend to just feed most of my carnivorous plants with fish food flakes, which they respond to really, really well. I get a lot of growth that way. And yeah, it just seems to work. I mean, you'll certainly notice it with, you need to feed this guy, because in the wild, they're real prolific feeders. You know, they catch a multitude of insects every single day. If you see them or observe them in their natural habitat, like most sundews, they're almost like black, because they'll just be covered with so many insects that they've caught. So, you know, when you stick something like this in an unnatural environment, such as a greenhouse, where they're unable to catch that prey, it can have a really significant impact on their growth rate. They either slow right down, or some things like Drosera bomani will just stop growing and eventually wane and dissipate. So you need to really bear in mind, you know, the feeding requirements of your Drosera, if at all. And it's not just Drosera as well, Nepenthes as well. Some people fertilise their Nepenthes. Same thing for me. I've got the little Nishi koi pellets. I tend to just drop those into the pitchers, and that seems to work really, really well. And they soon get dissolved and feed the plant. So I've also heard of people putting Osmocote pellets in the pitchers of their Nepenthes as well. Apparently that's supposed to be quite good. I have tried it in the past. What did I observe from doing it? I noticed that the pitchers died off pretty quickly, so that's probably there's just so much nitrogen being released from the pellets themselves. And there was some growth improvement, but the fact that it kills the pitchers off quite quickly is a shame, because I mean, you know, the main reason you grow that plant is for the attractive pitchers, you know, the traps that it uses to catch its prey. So I don't tend to use that anymore. I tend to just use the fish pellets, and that works really, really well. So I'm nearly doing well now. I'm just putting half handfuls in at a time, and just using my fingers just to firm it in. I'm about 2 inches away from the top of the pot now, so not far off. Just want to pack it in there quite tight, like this. And then we're going to have to give it a good watering in as well, to make sure everything settles in comfortably. Now, you may think I'm leaving this a little bit high, so it looks like it might be a little bit pronounced in the pot. What's not actually the case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a little lip around the pot, which is what I'm making with my fingers here. And then when I unpot this fella, I'm going to try and get some of this blasted moss off, because that's the only trouble with carnivorous plants. I find moss growth is astronomical. You just get so much of it because you're just creating a mini bog, aren't you, really, basically? And especially if you're using media such as it's come out of a bog garden or out of a bog, such as peat does, it's full of spores. So it doesn't take long. Give it the right environment, like a nice humid greenhouse, and off goes the moss. And yeah, it doesn't look unsightly, but it's nicer to frame the plant again, which is green, against something which isn't green, if that makes sense. So that undyed aquarium gravel, you might be able to see in the background. I use that as a top dressing for most of my carnivorous plants, and it really shows off the colours a lot more because you've got a white background, a green plant and a white background, so it just looks better. Okay, nearly finished now. Just got this last little pocket, this last little void over here just to fill in. Like this. And we're going to leave that cling film on right to the end, right up until all the top dressing's done and everything, and then at that point is when we'll whip it off. Okay, looking good, just a little bit more. Try to keep dropping it all over the place. There we go. Right. Okay, so that stays up nice and tight. So it's firmed in, so what we should be able to do is just lift up the pot from the inside, and the damp potting media, which we firmed in around the outside, should keep the square shape of the current pot and allow us just to tip the first out. There we go, perfect. Now I'm going to hold carefully around the base of the Drosera here. I'm going to tip it. Hopefully it's all going to stay together. It has. There we go. You can see how rocky that mix is just there. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to plop him back in. Comme ci, comme ça. Like that. And what I'm going to do, like I said before, whilst I'm here, is try and get rid of some of this moss. So I just put it out in little bits, and then any of the height loss we're going to make up with some gravel. I might put a little bit more peat in, but you want to get as much of this out as possible. I think we're going to be able to see the top of the Drosera regia. Right, it's almost like it creates like a large sort of leathery tap root, because if you get this thing, it's cold enough, it'll actually form a hibernaculum, which is basically a resting bud. So it will die back to this bud and then regenerate the next year. I don't keep them cold enough to do that. It just doesn't get cold enough in here for that to happen. But I've heard of other people doing it, so what I'm going to do is just keep pulling it out. It's coming away really easy because the original potting media was so loose or so granular. The moss has not really got anywhere to take hold, so there's a great big lump of it here. It's probably going to come out in one go. There we go. So that's all the moss removed. We'll try and get all of it off if we can, because it will just grow again otherwise. Right, a few little bits just here and here. A little bit around the back. It smells almost sweet, almost smells like honey. So what I'm going to pick you up to the camera, and you should be able to see the sort of the weird stalk that this thing grows out of. See that there? The roots sort of like poke out the bottom of it. So I'm just going to fill any excess space up using some more potting mix like this. Just bring that in around the base of the plant like that. Just to keep it covered, supported. Right, I'll go and get some gravel, throw this moss away, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I'm just applying some of the gravel. This is just the undyed aquarium gravel, what you can get from most aquarium shops or pet shops. Most places have got it. It's not very expensive, but it makes an excellent top dressing. It's light reflective, and also it's going to help to retard moss growth in a big way, because this guy will go outside in summer. It's in the greenhouse at the moment, just out of caution basically. But in the summer it goes outside. Now you've got to be quite careful if you are putting this outside, because obviously it hates getting warm roots, and we're in a black pot, which means it's going to really absorb a large amount of about a lot of heat from the sun. So bearing that in mind, what I do is I stand it in about 2 inches of water, and then I cover the entire pot with tin foil all the way around it to reflect sunlight, and that really helps keep the roots nice and cool, and they can grow outside pretty much all summer till it starts getting really cold. So I suppose all we need to do now is the grand reveal. So I should be able to just pull up, ta-da, it's all glued together, and then I can just very carefully peel everything back down, back to where it was before. And luckily we have a completely clean Drosera regia, which isn't covered in loads of moss and bits. Some of the old leaves there. Just grab a pair of scissors and nip that off. There we go. Nip that off there. There's another little old dead leaf just around the back here. Get those zipped up and out the way. And there we go, one repotted Drosera regia. Put the tag back in the side, just down here, and we're done. Only thing left to do is to give it a big watering in. So my Drosera lives over here at the moment, stood in a bit of water, which needs topping up. It's getting a bit low. Always make sure you orientate it the right way back round where it was before originally, like that. As it needs a little bit more gravel. Just over here there's a little bit of a bare patch, so hopefully I can just push it off my fingers into there like that. There we go. Brilliant stuff. Just grab a watering can. My kids have been in here, which means it could literally be anywhere. I have got a really handy little one here somewhere. Whoop, there it is, got it. And just go ahead and give that a good watering in. Like that. Wash the side of the pot off there a bit as well. And because it's free draining, that'll drain through very quickly and end up coming out in this tray, which I keep a range of my carnivorous plants in. And it's going to be great in there for another couple of years. I won't need to muck around with it at all. And any damage to, well, there's no damage, but any of the mucilage which we've removed by wrapping it up in the cling film will soon be produced back again on the plant. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that little bit of an instructional. I'm no expert on these, that's how I grow them, and I seem to be able to do it to some effect. So what I'll do is I'll keep you updated on the progress of the root cuttings we took. Hopefully that's going to be productive, and we're going to get a few more plants out of this and hopefully sell some. So thanks again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, like down below if you've enjoyed this video, and please subscribe.